had an amazing turnout. I think we're up about 40% in attendance since last year, which is great. I hope even more of you will join us next year. This is going to be a fantastic day of fun talks and an awesome party, I hope, later tonight. Let's not dwell on that right now, but we'll get into it more a little bit later. So some things we need to go over. Emergency exits are behind you, behind that black drape at the back of the hall. Toilets are through there. We're going to close those doors so you don't interrupt the speakers if you do need to go out. So go around and out through the door you'll see if you keep moving back and to the left. Coffee will be available throughout the entire conference as opposed to last year. And it will be where you got your sandwiches. Again, you'll access that room the way you came in, just where you got your badges and other stuff. So go out through there and you'll be able to get the coffee whenever you need it. Alright, we have a hashtag if you do want to talk about us on Twitter. It's hashtag SecFest. Please do. It's always good to spread the word. And I think that's it. We will be live streaming the event. It's on our YouTube channel. So if you want to spread that link, that would be amazing. And we'll have continuous updates if there's anything you guys need to know. If there is anything you do need to know that we haven't brought up, please don't hesitate to stop anyone with a crew shirt. And I think that's it. So without further ado, please welcome our keynote speaker, Steve Lord.
Just get this wired up. I asked last night, because my slide deck's quite dark, I said, how dark's the lighting going to be? How dark will it be here? And then I was immediately told that the leading cause of death amongst males is suicide by shotgun. But enough of happy fun things. I'm just waiting for this to boot up. And hopefully it says, this will all work perfectly fine. Praise be to the devil goats. Whoa, what first time. Alright. Okay, so this is a talk called Of Unicorns and Replicants. And if anybody here has ever seen a film called Blade Runner, then you're going to get a load of references, and if you haven't, then it's all going to go over your head. So this is me. By day I pen test, and by night I build little electronic hardware thingies. Which you guys all have, so we're going to be over in the far corner over there. If you want to solder your badge together, if you've never soldered before, this is the badge for you. It's specifically designed so that if you're hungover, if you're useless, if you have no idea what you're doing, the worst case scenario is that you smell burning chicken. But it will work, and it's a really, really nice little tool. It's a bit like an Arduino. It's called Hidia. We had a Kickstarter running, which we finished a couple of weeks ago, and we're about to ship. So you guys have got everything before most of the Kickstarter backers. And this is maybe my 4th or 5th keynote now, so technically that makes me a thought leader. And this is a positive talk. You're going to hear a lot of negative things today. You're going to hear a lot of things where it's going to sound like the sky is falling and things are bad, so it's always good to open with a positive talk. And the topic of this talk is the state of IoT security. Or as I like to call it, this is fine. Alright. But this is a positive talk. Okay, so the first question that we should ask ourselves is, Did I actually test the headphone jack for the audio for this? I'm just going to quickly jump out and then make sure that this isn't putting the audio through HDMI. Okay, there we go. Cool. All right. So are we in a bubble? And I think to answer this, we should not look at what the commercial space is doing in IoT. Let's look at what the open source space is doing in IoT.
A while ago I made this motorized pen, and even though I personally think that this is a revolutionary design, some people point out that it doesn't really follow the trends of the industry. They say that it should be an IoT device with Bluetooth and a smartphone app to control it. Who am I to argue with Reddit, so we decided to give it a shot, and, well, have a look at this. It's absolutely bloody brilliant! Using a pen has never been this easy before. All you have to do is download and install the app, turn on Bluetooth of course, set up pairing with your device, and then... wait for it, and then you just swipe your finger. It's amazing. I'm sure whoever invented the pen intended it to work like this, and not with the silly button at the back. Still, I think we can do even better than this, by adding voice control. Now, the Siri in my phone doesn't seem to work very well. Can you open my pen, Siri?
What were you saying? I wasn't really listening.
So I took the pen and connected it to my laptop instead to use its voice control feature. Computer, open pen. Computer, close pen. Overall, I think we're onto something great here, and now I understand, well, all products have to be smart these days. It just makes all these items much more convenient to use. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, computer, close pen.
Okay. So, that's what the open source community is doing. And the easiest way to tell whether or not we're in a bubble as far as IoT is concerned is to identify products that are solutions looking for a problem. And to say, if there's maybe one smart pen on the market, then, okay, all right, things are probably reasonable. We're testing the market, we're maybe at the early stage of the curve. If there are a ton of smart pens on the market, perhaps we're in a bubble. So I went to a website called Top 10 Reviews, and these are the top 10 smart pens for 2017. So I guess we're in a bubble. And you might notice that there is one pen in particular that stands out, not because of its overall rating, but because of the fact that it's $1,115. Now, I don't know about you guys, but what I really look for in a pen is the ability to make permanent impressions on paper. Now, I can get that for maybe 5 of these for $1. So, for $1,000, my expectations are going to be pretty high. So let's see what the Top 10 Review site had to say about this most expensive smart pen. And they rated it 8.53 out of 10. And on the pros side, they said, well, it doesn't need to be paired when writing, meaning you can sync your notes later, because nothing annoys me more about a smart pen than a smart pen that stops writing because it's lost its pairing. And on the con side, it says, the smart pen makes an audible buzzing noise while writing. Now, for $1,000, I expect this to play deep, soulful music while writing. So, we're obviously in a bubble, and there's obviously really useless things being created. The question is, how did we get here? And in order to understand this, we have to go back. So, let's go back. Back to 1982. And in 1982, a bunch of guys at Carnegie Mellon University had some really great ideas, and this was not one of them. They had a Coke machine in the hall, and they wanted to know, before they get up to go and get Coke, whether or not there are Cokes in the machine. So they built a system of micro switches and put them on the bottom of the Coke machine tray. And that way, they hooked it up to a PDP, and they could finger it across the internet to see whether or not there was coke in the machine. And this is the first recorded IoT device. The second device was a coffee machine, which eventually, refinements of that led to the Internet Coffee Protocol. But things have progressed a little bit from there. And in 1985, Peter Lewis, at an FCC session, came up with a very long-winded definition of what he called the Internet of Things. And basically, he defined it as the integration of people, processes, and technology with connectable devices and sensors to enable remote monitoring, status, manipulation, and evaluation of trends of such devices. And I like to think that Peter Lewis was very hopeful about what the Internet of Things would become. Perhaps misplaced in that hope, but I like to think hopeful. And if you look on the left, what you can see here is we have a typical Internet of Things device, which is an LED scrolly thing for dogs. Now, you may notice that it says here that when your dog wanders away, lost mode is activated. Now, looking at the position of that jacket, if your dog could read, I'm not sure it's going to know that it's lost. You, on the other hand, are not going to read that sign if your dog's lost. So, you know your dog's lost because it's not there. Your dog knows it's lost because you're not there. You don't know where your dog is. Your dog doesn't necessarily know where it is, it smells like bugs. And thus we have this whole issue of things coming out where basically they're kind of the hold my beer of product ideas. Speaking of the hold my beer of product ideas, this is one of the first consumer IoT devices, the LG Dios fridge. And what they did was they took an $800 fridge and they thought, how can we make this $10,000? And they had a genius idea. What they did was they took a 15-inch web pad, glued it onto the front, wired it up to an Ethernet connector with a stylus, and put a digital camera on there so you could see the inside of your fridge by walking up to your fridge, taking the stylus out, tapping through a bunch of menus to bring up the webcam app, and then you can look inside your fridge. It's a great idea and totally justified the $10,000 price tag. And for a long time, a lot of IoT devices just kind of were things that were ordinary with a sensor bolted on, and then something magical happened. By magical, I mean horrifying. Kickstarter came along in 2009. It is the perfect intersection of people who have never made a product before and people who have never invested in something before. And having finished a Kickstarter, I can tell you it's an incredibly surreal experience. But effectively, there's problems everywhere. So let's have a look at what Kickstarter thinks about the smart pen industry. The fact we have a smart pen industry causes me a bunch of despair. But this is a positive talk. We can see that we have a bunch of different devices. Lots of things are the world's first. On Kickstarter, everything is the world's first. There were several world's first smart pens. And also on here we have some world's first smart paper and pen notebooks. And we also have some stuff that's actually not so bad, like a smart e-paper notebook thing that you draw on. All of which, solutions looking for problems. So the fact that we have these IoT devices that have these functional issues in that we're not really sure what problems they solve and we're not really sure if they're actually worthwhile leads to a situation where things get an initial amount of funding, you're trying to ship a product, but the follow-on from that, there's no real incentive to make it secure. And this leads to a bunch of problems with IoT devices. The first of which is botnets. So we've all heard of Mirai, and there are similar botnets, but we can't really blame IoT for the existence of Mirai, and the reason for that is that Mirai would have happened anyway. The fact that we have a bunch of insecure devices on the internet is not new. It's simply the scale of these devices. But if it wasn't this, it would be something else. It would be WannaCry. It would be something else out there. So when you see all of this stuff in the media, don't let it get to you. This is just noise. Look for the signal. Another common problem with IoT is endpoints. So I'll give you an example of an endpoint that's serious. So there are minor endpoints. For example, there's a webcam that every year at 44Com, which is a conference I co-organise in London, we get submissions for the same internet webcam. And the webcam itself is hideously insecure, but I broke it in 2009 and it wasn't new then. And it's an OEM that produces the same webcam, and you can spot it's the same webcam because it has Telnet or SSH or a web service with a remote code execution bug, or a heap overflow and a buffer overflow in the same URL path, and a root password of 123456, which is conveniently stored in read-only memory. So, that's a common thing that happens and it's not going away. And that endpoint will still be there in 20 years from now. But when your webcam gets hacked, it's not necessarily the end of the world. You can get a new webcam. On the other hand, when your pacemaker gets hacked, that's a different issue entirely. So when we're told that the sky is falling when it comes to IoT, realistically, we shouldn't care about the webcams of the world so much. We should that's noise. Just don't worry about it. It's something we have to live in. It's the world we live in now. It's like Donald Trump. But when a pacemaker goes wrong, that we need to care about. So St. Jude Medical is an interesting company. I went to their website and they had a company facts page. And I don't know about you guys, but whenever I see a company that has a dedicated page to company facts, I smell bullshit. So they had a really interesting thing going on. They weren't actually doing so well financially in some areas. And they'd been in talks to be acquired by another company. And then a third party, somewhat presciently named Muddy Waters, hired a medical security specialist to go and have a look at St. Jude Medical's stuff. So said researcher had a look at the stuff, produced a report, passed it back to Muddy Waters. And Muddy Waters' business model is this. They find companies that they think might not be doing so great or might have skeletons in the closet. Then they bang the drums about the stuff in the closet after they've opened a short position. And then they wait for the stock price to get down, and then they close out that position and make a ton of money. That is their business model. So these are not exactly the nicest guys in the world. The security researchers, on the other hand, totally cool dudes. So they get asked to review this thing called Merlin at Home, and, sure enough, they produce a report which Muddy Waters then release, which is somehow strangely hard to find as a result of various accusations and potential lawsuits. But I've got it anyway, and it's quite an interesting read. And basically, they rooted the device that configures the pacemaker. So by modifying the device that configures the pacemaker, you can modify the pacemaker. The interesting thing about this wasn't necessarily that Muddy Waters were deliberately doing this to screw with the stock price of St. Jude Medical in the middle of an acquisition. The interesting thing is St. Jude's reaction. Their CTO said that the claims were absolutely untrue. Now, I don't know about you, but I trust a screenshot of a hash prompt more than 90% of other things that I trust. So the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration in the US, got involved. And then, strangely enough, after getting involved, they actually figured out that, so the pacemaker can be modified to give out shocks when it shouldn't, or deplete the battery, or change the pacing so that it's inappropriate, or any number of really bad things. So we now know that it's true. We also know that the CTO made false statements in the middle of an acquisition. And things went wrong. And later on, when they started to patch and update, they sent patches out across their Merlin at Home network, and they put out this weird statement saying that they continue to lead the way in advancing cybersecurity protections. It's an interesting definition of the word leading the way. But, they said that all medical devices using remote monitoring are exposed to the risk of potential cybersecurity attack. Fair enough. True. Not all of them actually allow you to change the pacing and deliver electric shocks. And they said that they're not aware of any cybersecurity incidents, which of course is a perfectly rational thing to say if you believe that absence of evidence constitutes evidence of absence. But ultimately, the lesson that we have to learn from this is that the FDA realized at that point that this stuff affects them. The FDA signed off on pacemakers that could be hacked. So this happens in incredibly critical and sensitive environments where patching is not necessarily an immediate thing due to certification. And that's the kind of stuff that we need to worry about with IoT. The bulk of the stuff isn't really an issue. Another problem that we get with IoT is overreach. And I'll give you an example of a company that has a big problem with overreach, and it's a TV maker, and it's not Samsung. They have a small problem with overreach by comparison. So Vizio are the US's largest LCD TV seller by volume. And I can tell you now, they did not get to where they were by making really fantastic LCD TVs. What they made was cheap LCD TVs. And as smart TVs started to take off, they developed a smart TV platform. And in their platform, what they had was they used advertising to supplement their revenue, which would then allow them to reduce the price of the LCD TVs. The margins on TVs are really tiny, they're really razor thin. So they're constantly trying to innovate in ways that they can tell you make this TV better than the other TV that you see next to it. So what Vizio did was they developed a thing they called Smart Interactivity, which was deployed across 10 million Vizio Smart TVs. And what that did was monitor everything you're doing and send it back to the mothership. So far, so not so abnormal. Let's see what the Chicago Tribune had to say about that. All right, let's not see what the Chicago Tribune has to say about that. Let's see what that partisan blog of the Federal Trade Commission has to say about that. You know you're doing badly when your regulator has to post a blog post to explain just how messed up you are. So, on a second-by-second basis, bearing in mind this is from the FTC, this is their regulator saying this. On a second-by-second basis, Vizio collected a selection of pixels on the screen that it matched to a database of TV, movie, and commercial content. They captured as many as 100 billion data points each day from millions of TVs. Now that's not the worst thing that happened, because what happened was they provided consumers' IP addresses to data aggregators, who then matched the address with individual consumers and households. The contract stopped them re-identifying by name, but they could identify by household, they could identify by sex, age, income, marital status, household size, education, and home ownership. And this was not anonymized. And they got away with it. And the thing about overreach in the IoT space is that the data is the biggest money maker that there is. When you get an IoT product that does something useless like a smart pen, everything that you do with that smart pen, that data is recorded. And the people who make it have to look at how they make money to support the services off the back. And the main money maker, par none, is to send data to the mothership and sell it for advertising. So these guys, ended up tracking people individually and provided that to other advertisers to track individually. But, overreach problems are rarely publicized, but there's a lot of them out there. And this is something that we should be concerned about. And the final IoT problem, which is not unique to IoT, in fact, the airline I came over had an availability problem this weekend, is availability. And to demonstrate availability, I'm going to show you an advert for a real IoT product. Now, I thought that the advert was a little bit boring, so what I did was I just overlaid some information on top to keep things going. So this is not the authorized advert, and under fair use doctrines, I have tweaked it Okay, so those one-star reviews, they're from the product page on Amazon. That's just the first set. You go through these reviews and it's a dumpster fire as far as the reviewers are concerned. And I can't help but feel that part of that is because bits of plastic keep coming off the kibble feeder and choking pets. But that's not an IoT problem. So let's talk about the IoT problem that PetNet had. Now, PetNet is not the only IoT provider to have a problem, but there was a fundamental flaw with their product, aside from choking pets, which is that they had an outage for 10 hours. Now, when they had that outage, because the PetNet feeder connects back to the mothership, it could no longer do so. And that meant that it didn't feed pets, which is pretty tough when you have one job, PetNet. One job. Just feed my pet when I'm not there. I like to think that's why this guy is sat with his pet by his feeder, making sure that this thing's actually doing the job it's meant to do. But, nobody likes headlines like cats, dogs starve as web-connected chow shoe PetNet plays dead. But for $149, realistically, when you can buy a 12-serving feeder for about $50 that works on a timer instead, it's a bit of a letdown. So the fundamental problem that they had and what they needed to do was obviously make it so that it connects to the mothership periodically and then has a built-in real-time clock that can say, okay, at this time of the day, just put the food out. Try not to get bits of rubber in there. And even in the reviews, which were glowing, there were problems. So this review was one that I found, it was one of the first reviews I found just Googling it. And one warning that alerted me that Felix missed a feeding, this was the result of the smart feeder's battery dying. Sadly, it was not preceded by any low battery warning that would have given me a chance to recharge. You would think that they would have resolved this issue, but no. But still, when I let the food hopper run out completely, I got the usual notifications that Felix had been fed. PetNet says a couple false positives might register when the hopper runs dry, and it's tightening up this functionality. So, there are functional issues above and beyond the availability element of this product. And it's not the only device that's a smart device. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that some of these problems are not entirely limited to the scope of the smart element of the device. And sometimes the IoT just is not good. So the question I'd like to ask is there such a thing as good IoT from a security perspective? What good IoT is out there? And the answer to that is yes. But you might not think of it as IoT. So if we exclude mobile phones, because mobile phones are the perfect example of a good IoT device. They are the intersection of sensors, data, and human interaction with the internet. They are, in effect, the thing of internet. The Oyster card is a transport card used by Transport for London in the UK. And it's been running for years and years and years, and it's been battle-hardened over time. Now, it's not without its flaws, but it has a mature program for management. That makes it a good IoT device. Payment systems, physical payment systems like Apple Pay, where we have tightly regulated environments that properly control data, they are good IoT devices. If we look back at St. Jude Medical, that's a regulated environment where the regulator lacks maturity from a security perspective. They will get it right, and when they do, things will start to improve. They just have to figure out how that's going to work. Wemo by Belkin is an example of a product that's had so many bugs, so many problems. The Wemo Belkin switch has been hacked 7 ways from sundown over a period of years, but they have a mature product now and it's getting better. And the final thing I want to show you, which is just a picture of a map up there, is Orion. So Orion is a really good example of in-house IoT. Orion is the UPS system for sending out trucks on routes with a minimal amount of distance coverage. It's a way of resolving this traveling salesman problem. And what makes Orion so good is that it's a primary focused piece of IoT that is focused on delivering something that works. And I can't speak much for the security of the thing because that's not public information, but it is saving UPS a hell of a lot of money and a hell of a lot of carbon emissions as well. So if we have good IoT and we have bad IoT and we have downright humorous IoT, we can say that the good IoT is what we would call the unicorns. And we would say that the bad IoT that's lagging, that's copying the failings of unicorns past, are the replicants. And we can ask ourselves, what does leading IoT look like today? And the way it looks like is that normally you have 6 parts to a piece of modern IoT. You have an end device, which may be an individual sensor on a sensor network with a hub over a wireless protocol, or may just be a device itself that connects via Wi-Fi or Bluetooth and speaks over a communications medium. And that speaks to a comms service. And the comms service is separate to everything else. It's a broker. And what the comms service does is it takes the stuff coming in and then redirects it to the relevant internal service. There's a management service which is normally accessed through an application on the phone or on a web page, and that allows people to go and manage their device, their thing. There may also be back-end systems as part of that management device that allow the inventors or the owners to go and manage the data that's coming through. And at the back end, disconnected from all of that front end, you have that sweet, sweet money mining data. Again, going from the comms service, you should have a physically separate maintenance service, and that's a system that provides updates, management, telemetry, stuff like that. And again, that connects to the sweet, sweet money mining data capability. And then it kind of all looks like this, with most of it in the cloud. By contrast, what do replicants look like? Well, yeah, nowhere near as organized. In fact, you could say that if the leading edge is well organized and structured, then the trailing edge is kind of just doing it on the hog. It's kind of just like, we don't know. We're just kind of, whatever. We got a Kickstarter going. Which leads us to the question, are things getting worse? And I know so far this talk has not been as positive as I might have initially hoped. But to answer that question, we have to go back to 2005. 2015, rather. And in 2015, this is what leading IoT looked like. Which is kind of more like this. Except it was more like a cascading set of dumpifiers in kind of dumpifiers in a Matryoshka doll type configuration. So this is a very fast-moving target. And in 2015, what we had immature cloud platforms that these things were based on. So things like AWS, Azure, they weren't quite fully matured. HANA Cloud Platform, IBM Bluemix, they weren't even around. These days, we actually have mature cloud platforms that are not just from the cloud providers. We have IoT cloud platforms from providers like Electric Imp and Particle. There was very little by way of open guidance. I actually did a closing keynote at AppSec EU 2 years ago in 2015, and that was actually partly about the OWASP IoT project, which had only just got off the ground. And there were these unrealistic expectations, because everybody was told that IoT is going to change the world. And if you believe that a smart pen that costs $1,000 is going to change the world, I have a smart bridge to sell you. And when it comes to the maintenance systems, there was very little guidance in 2015. But partly because there's been so much development in helping people package stuff from an open source perspective and distribute them, you now have a lot more ways to do code signing, a lot more ways to do distribution and delivery over things like even just GitHub. We now have more secure distribution frameworks, and the IoT cloud providers provide distribution updates that are signed, that are properly managed. In 2015, we had very little guidance on maintenance, and now we have lots. Back in 2015, there were web/native mobile apps. So you would have, in your code base, you would have an iOS app. And the iOS app would have separate code subbases for the iPhone and iPad. You would then have separate code bases and separate subcode bases for Android, Android phone, Android tablet, possibly Android TV, and Android whatever the hell we can piggyback off this week to get VR. There would be disparate forms of connectivity, so people would be reliant on random RF modules, and they'd let the RF module decide what's going on, and the microcontrollers were kind of like, we can't handle encryption. Encryption is too intense for us to actually do. There would be things like USB serial interfaces or physical Ethernet jacks for stuff. So it's all disparate and nobody really has a standard. Whereas just 2 years later, what we have now is we have fairly unified frameworks and paradigms for management apps, which consist of Grounded, Cordova, PhoneGap, things like that. So we're wrapping it in a web UI, and then we build a bunch of apps off the back of it. But it's a known attack surface rather than an unknown attack surface, and we have common connectivity with BLE and Wi-Fi. Zigbee is on its way out. We have LoRaWAN for long-distance stuff in, say, something like the control system space. But most of the stuff you see, especially consumer IoT, is going to be BLE and Wi-Fi. Our comms services would use proprietary protocols or half-assed implementations of HTTP. Back in 2004, I worked on what could be considered a predecessor of the type of thing to UPS's Orion project. And the guys who built the kit, one of the guys who built the software, which was based on Windows CE and a Pocket PC, actually wrote his own web server because it was the first time he'd ever done a web application. And he's like, how do I shut web? Wrote a physical HTTP server that integrated all of the actual paths and everything in, and all of the application elements, because he needed an application server. So, and this was the norm for IoT. In fact, it still is in some areas. And it would grab data all the time, because when you've got guys in Silicon Valley coming up with new ways to spin money out of stuff, they have excellent connectivity. If you go to South Africa, or if you go to even places like Australia, the connectivity is not the same. So grabbing all the data all the time is going to saturate your connection. Whereas now, what we have is standardized protocols. You know if you're an IoT developer that you're either going to use some sort of JSON-type serialization, and you want to abstract the actual protocol from what you're doing if possible, so it'll be HTTPS, but you want to have some sort of standardized approach with an API. And then if you want to do pub/sub, you're either going to use something like Mosquito, or you're going to use something like RabbitMQ, or some sort of message queuing system. And what we have now is, instead of grabbing all the data, we only have IoT manufacturers grabbing profitable data, because they realize they have to pay for storage, which is still too much, but it's progress. So, the other thing to consider is that in 2015, our comms mediums were mostly unencrypted. So everything would be HTTP, and if you're the kind of person who's totally worried about Five Eyes, one of those paranoid dudes, not like most British people, we don't care, that everything that we do is monitored and everything that we do is watched. If you're one of those people that's annoyed by such things, you might think before you buy an IoT device, could somebody take over this by intercepting the traffic? For most stuff, it was like, yeah, you can deliver your own custom firmware and update the device. Because there's no integrity checks. And the thing is that we expected these things to be secure because we were being told that they change the world, but we never specified how. We never specified what the requirements for security were. We never specified what constitutes security in these devices. And that's because there were a lot of unknowns. Whereas now what we have is we have microcontrollers that support crypto in the hardware. We have security baked into the silicon with things like Trust Zone and with some of the work that's happening in the Sci-5 area. We have integrity checks at the transport level. We have integrity checks at the code update level. That stuff is now available in the IoT frameworks. And that's all because we've set expectations.
Volkswagen, das Auto.
Another 100% certified emissions test pass from an end device. Our end devices were terrible in 2015. They would have telnet interfaces left open. It's one thing to leave test points and a UART on the board. It's another thing to have telnet open and UPnP configured to map that to the internet. But these days we don't. We have less of that. That webcam, that OEM webcam that we get submissions for every year is still out there, still forwarding telnet, still opening that up to the internet with its route 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 over UPnP. But the modern stuff, people have realized that it pays to not have your telnet port open. We're improving the hardening, so we're starting to see more capable microcontrollers. We're starting to see capable microcontrollers that have concepts of trust put forward in a way that IoT developers can understand. You might think of trust as, please don't look at a tiny corner of my TV screen, watch what I'm doing, and send it back to the mothership so that you can sell me a better class of porn. But when I say trust, I mean the code executing is verified. We can verifiably say that it's watching stuff to recommend better porn. And we have limits and expectations set more appropriately. So the question that leads to is, are things getting better? And I believe that they are. And IoT isn't my first rodeo. It's not even my second rodeo. I'm jaded and cynical for a reason. And it's not that, I'm some green dude off the strip. But because this is a keynote, I feel it's obligatory to introduce a Gartner chart. And this is Gartner's hype cycle. I'm not sure where Gartner sit in this hype cycle. But IoT is no different a technology or anything else. And what we have is at the start, from left to right, we have a tech trigger, the initial spark, that Coca-Cola machine at CMU. Then we reach the expectation peak, which is somewhere around 2015. The hype cycle was at its most. This is going to be revolutionary, change the world. Let's have every 20-year-old who's dropped out of university some funding, and then they can pretend to be the next Steve Jobs sort of stuff. And now we are skiing wonderfully down the piste of the despair trough. Again, this is positive talk. But we're going to come out of that onto the slope of enlightenment, as Gartner call it, into the productivity plateau. We will get there. Things will start to get there. We're improving already. We're starting to see changes in silicon, changes in platforms. We're starting to see consolidation. Things are getting better. And another cycle that I could use, or another chart that I can show that has no numbers on it, to make my point, is the Meter maturity cycle. So Meter is a standards organization, which lends what I'm about to tell you some credibility, despite the fact I have no numbers on the chart. In 2015, we had immature technology, and there was very little experience in dealing with the fallout from this technology within people who work in the functional areas of the IoT space. And that's when we encounter a new technology, that's how we have to look at it. We cannot assume that there are a bunch of security people there by default. We have to look at those guys and go, if we have the equivalent of guys who've just learned how to make a PHP page, and we put them in charge of a Volkswagen safety system, who's going to tell them how to do security? Because if nobody does, then what we're going to get is that emissions test. Whereas if we tell them how to do it right, we'll never know about that emissions test. So, in 2017, what we have is that improving tech and experience. And Meter says that there's a new technology point where the maturity is at its lowest. Makes sense. And then it improves, and it becomes mature. And as it becomes mature, what happens is that new things pop up within the technology that make it so that the maturity dips. So we can see this in web applications, for example, where a new class of vulnerability appears, but it affects a subset of technologies rather than the whole piece. We haven't really had anything major on the scale of, say, SQL injection for a long, long time with web application, and that's because web application security is an understood problem, and there are solutions available for dealing with the problems that are understood. And now I'm going to do something that you should never do with a chart, which is superimpose two unrelated things on top of each other. But this is a keynote, and I can get away with that. So if we look at the two unrelated chart items there, we can see that actually there is, if you think about it, some element of I wouldn't say correlation, but similarity between the two. We know that when a technology is young, then it's immature. That's obvious. We also know that hype picks up while the technology is immature. So by the time we hit that piece going down to the despair trough, we are riding on an immature technology. So when you see people going, hey, I rooted this webcam, I rooted this baby monitor type thing, basically what you're doing is you're punching a 5-year-old and stealing their lunch money. It's not exactly busting open Chrome on Pwn to own. And that's realistically because these things haven't matured. So over time they'll improve, and over time it becomes harder to exploit, and people will move on. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do something that is typical of a keynote. I'm going to stick my name on something, and I'm going to call it Lord's Observed Security Megacycle, because I couldn't come up with a decent backronym that was quite rude, that involved swear words or something. So we're just going to have to make do with LOSM. And basically what we have is we have the hype train at the left. That hype train leaves the station. We have security expectation hits a peak, because we ride off the back of a bunch of marketing material, and we should be suspicious, but it's just so shiny. It's just so shiny, and it's going to change the world. And then, just as we start to understand the problem space, the hype train derails and smashes into everything, and suddenly black hat. And what happens is, with any new technology that's actually got a serious hype train behind it, come black hat, come conference season, you're going to see tons and tons of stuff about this technology is dreadful. This technology should be encased in concrete like Chernobyl, and we should just pretend it's not there. This is the Fukushima of that technology. I made an IoT webcam drive on the highway and stopped it remotely, with a journalist inside the webcam. You're going to see all this stuff come out. And that's because it's a natural progression of understanding the shape and size of the problem space. And what happens is that first year around that cycle, we start to understand the problem space. People come back from Vegas and start going, man, my head's sore. Some guy said some crazy shit about a webcam. And they start working on solutions to the problems. But these are point solutions for point problems. We understand parts of the solution space, but we don't understand the whole. So we iterate through this and we go back through, and then eventually these things consolidate into a bunch of products that are just as bad as the very products were in the first place. Security to protect you from WannaCry. Anybody see any WannaCry adverts? Seriously? What kind of industry do we live in where people just ambulance chase like that? It's not like it's an unknown problem. It's not even like it's an unknown solution. The patch had been out for months. There is nothing you could sell me that would resolve WannaCry that can't be achieved with WSUS. So, a new technology appears. And then, because of problems, we might say it threatens the original inventors in some way. And ultimately, there are problems that threaten the safety and viability of its users. And then what happens is these point problems meet point solutions. But not all these solutions are the right solutions. They're point solutions, not the whole thing. And not all of the iterations that come out survive, not all the solutions survive. So what we do is we manage the problem space, we manage the individual point solutions, and then we go and pull that together to create a single set of solutions that are consolidated. And you see this with every technology. You will look and you'll see there's leaders and individual point elements, and then there's a period of consolidation. In the UK pen testing industry, for example, we're undergoing a massive period of consolidation from pretty much hundreds of providers down to a smaller number. And that's how companies like NCC exist, through acquisition, and other companies as well. They reach a point where they can't grow anymore, so they have to acquire. And that consolidation in the marketplace leads to a concentration of expertise and a concentration of failure. But we've been here before, and the best example of this is Web AppSec, where because we understand the problem space and the solution space, we can say it's mature, and new things will pop up and challenge us in any technology space. But they become point problems when we have a consolidated solution that becomes business as usual, trying to resolve them. So, unicorns and replicants share some qualities, and realistically, we should welcome their failures. They are telling us what not to do, and we shouldn't fear them when they happen, because individual devices tend to have a short lifespan, and sometimes the memories that they give us are really all that we have. But even then, after a while, when you think about it, all these moments will be lost, like tears in rain. So, I'd just like to say, when you're looking at this stuff today, and you see all these bad things, remember the positive, but when you go out and have a go at some of this stuff, and when you identify failings, you're actually helping people. So it's time to hack. I've been Steve Lord, thank you very much.
Thank you. That's amazing. So, do we have any questions from the crowd? Raise your hand. Any questions? This might be a good time to mention that the best audience question this year wins 2 tickets to 44Con, courtesy of Steve. So give a round of applause for that. So I think we have one there.
You were talking a lot about Internet of Things and software that is running on it, and about hardening. I wanted to ask you one question. You might know about a project called YearSec, or Year Security, that tries to make a hardened Linux kernel. And one of the problems that it has is that since it's GPL software, you have to provide the sources for that hardened kernel if you want to distribute the kernel inside the Internet of Things devices. Do you think projects like YearSec that have more open licenses will arise at some point of time?
It's a tough one. So am I right in saying the question's about more open licenses and open source in IT? Yeah. So.
Yes.
Yeah. So there are open source platforms and platform elements out there. There's very little incentive for IoT providers to use open source because you're in effect giving away the secret source. So has anybody ever heard of a thing called NomX? It is the most secure email solution in the world. There is no email as secure as this. And a UK blogger, typical UK blogger, who does nothing all day but monitor things like SSL and TLS deployments and stuff and help people secure them. A UK blogger. He went and had a look at NomX, and then he took their proprietary product based on a Raspberry Pi and pulled it apart. And that's all their secret source out now, just because of that one UK blogger. So there's no incentive for these guys. There's a huge incentive for charlatans to go and hide and obscure this stuff. And IoT, in many respects, is just an extension of two kind of other technologies, the embedded space and cloud, and neither of those have been good actors as a whole in terms of open source, and they need to try and open things up. The only way we can really do that is by force. So, the batches that you've got, we're releasing the source at the end of next month because we're required to, because we use the VUSB library, which is GPL, and we have to provide the source for all of our stuff, including our hardware, stipulation of their license, and rightly so. And I think, if we had more examples of what went wrong, because we have more open source, we can definitely find better answers to some of the problems.
All right. Sorry about that. Let's see, any more questions? Go ahead. Here we go. You talked about a lot of vulnerabilities and all the IoT stuff. Have you built any into the badge for learning?
All the bugs are things that you add yourself.
All right, let's see.
Thank you for a great talk. You mentioned a short lifespan on the devices, but looking at like pacemakers, what would you say is the status of connected pacemakers, and when would you put the pacemaker or accept the connected pacemaker in yourself?
That's an interesting question. So when it comes to pacemakers, as I understand it, they have quite a long lifespan for the devices, but one of the things is that their firmware doesn't have a huge amount of lifespan by comparison. I think you can expect a pacemaker's firmware to be updated periodically, and that's really down to the regulators to find out how often that should be. Personally, going back to the earlier question about open source, it's an interesting quandary that's created. I'm not really sure that I want to be able to run my own unsigned code on a pacemaker that is inside me. I mean, I don't know you guys, but every time I declare a variable, I'm pretty sure an angel dies. So, it's an interesting quandary, but I think probably you're looking at maybe sort of 10 to 20 years for the lifetime of a pacemaker, but the software itself will get updated more regularly.
All right, let's see. Anyone else? Again, there's 44 tickets on the line, guys. All right, I think that's... Oh, I have one question there. That'll be the last one.
Great talk. My question is about, do you think we as a security community will actually handle this problem, or do you think lawmakers will get to us first?
So that's a very interesting question. When it comes to web security, do you think that we got there first, or do you think PCI DSS did?
I don't think we fixed that problem yet either.
I think that realistically, probably our best chance is to provide guidance, and then for lawmakers and regulators to mandate compliance with some sort of baseline standard. I think the mistake that we could make is by making those baseline standards low enough for the manufacturers to continue to limbo underneath and get away with it.
All right, that's all the time we have for questions, but while we do have you on stage, Steve, I was wondering if you could show us and tell us a little bit about the badges that you should all have in your giveaway swag bags.
Okay, so earlier this year, for the last year and a half, I've been working on a project called the HIDIA, the Human Interface Device Input-Output Toolkit. And I've been working on this for quite a while now, and basically what it is a bit like an Arduino, but you build it yourself from the ground up, you solder the parts, we've got soldering stations and bits and pieces over there. It also has a unique property about it in that it can emulate any USB HID device. And it's not really that unique, but it's just really easy to do. So if you consider things like USB rubber ducky attacks and things like that, it's quite easy to implement. It's not as powerful as a USB rubber ducky, but it's extendable. So a couple of weeks ago, I plugged in a BLE module, wired that up, got that working. So I then had a BLE-controlled USB rubber ducky. I can't imagine what people would want to use that for. But, you could do things like plugging LoRaWAN modules on to use it from distance, or you can just do things like, we've got some examples of stuff where we've got scrolling messages and blinking lights and stuff that you can do as well. And the main thing isn't to make it a really cool badge, it's to make it so that the barrier to entry is low.
But it is a really cool badge.
Thanks. But things like the board's extra thick, it's really hard to damage the board and the components. You can assemble this if you've never soldered before. You can assemble this if you are hungover. You can assemble this if you have the flu and the shakes, as one guy did at Hack in the Box a couple of months back. There is literally nobody in this room who will struggle with it. And your biggest number one risk is that you smell burning chicken. in which case just put the soldering iron down and then give it a moment and start again. So there's really no excuse to not put these things together, and especially if you've never soldered before, it's really easy. It's what it's designed for.
Fantastic. All right, another round of applause for Steve, please.
Thank you.
All right, so a couple of things I forgot to mention before. We do have a CTF running at the moment. It's at securityfest.ctf.rocks. So please get on there. There'll be some amazing prizes to be handed out to all local teams that do place for pricing. Let's see, what else? Badges, covered that. Beer tickets and drink tickets are in your bags, so please don't forget those. And of course, I would like to thank our amazing sponsors, especially our premium sponsor, SecureLink. And please do go and check out our sponsor area and talk with the guys over there. They will be available throughout the day. And now we have about, let's see, 5-ish minutes until the next talk. So go and grab a coffee, be back here in 5 minutes. And we'll be ready for our own business. All right.
Yeah, no. Yay! You're gonna be on the big screen. By the way, you should some of them. Where are you? Ah, perfect. Then try Yeah, wait. Come on, I want to go on the fucking stage. I want to go on the stage. Those were like second place. We have.
All right, guys, it's time to take your seats for the next talker, please. All right, everyone, please take your seats. We're about to start the next talk. All right, most people are in their seats. I think we should go now so we can keep the schedule. By the way, the schedule is available at schedule.securityfest.com if you do want to see it. All right, please put your hands together for our next speaker, Aaron Guzman.
Thanks, John. Glad you guys can make it. This is going to be Don't Get Caught in Bed. So it's kind of, I'm hoping it's going to complement the keynote. A little bit more low level, and some technical aspects to it, defensive and offensive wise. So my name is Aaron Guzman. My Twitter is up there. Usually tweet out my slides or research, whatever I'm working on. Whether that's within car hacking, mobile app space, or embedded or IoT as well. I'm from Los Angeles, so right now it's literally the middle of the night, 1:20 in the morning. I'm definitely a big pizza fan. Late last year, I set out to find some bugs in apps like Domino's, and I ended up getting free pizza. And everywhere I go, usually, I try to get pizza from, if they have a Domino's or a local pizza place, I definitely try to order. So last night was the speaker dinner, but probably, I'll be here for the weekend, so probably Saturday or sometime this week I'll get to try Gothenburg's Domino's or whatever you guys have here. I'll figure it out very, very soon. So currently at SecureWorks, I used to work at Balkan and Linksys. I used to lead the security for the networking part of Linksys and Balkan. So that's like the webcams and the Linksys routers, as well as I was on the Wemo team. I know Steve Grizzly talked or touched upon that. We'll get to more of those kind of painful stories later on. I'm currently a board member for OWASP Los Angeles, as well as a board member for Cloud Security Alliance Southern California, previous president as well. Been involved for about 4 years in the Los Angeles area as far as the community is concerned. I also lead a project called the Embedded Application Security Project for OWASP, and I also contribute to IoT Project and the mobile testing guide as well. I've spoken at DEF CON IoT Village the last couple years, DerbyCon. Hopefully I'll get to speak about some car hacking research actually submitted only to DEF CON and Steve's conference, so let's see what happens. It's on Subaru, by the way, so it should be fun. Not a space that's been researched. I've also talked at Hackfest in Canada, RSA. I also co-organize AppSec California, so that's all the OWASP chapters for California. We get together. We have a conference in Santa Monica on the beach last weekend of January. So if you guys want to get away from the winter cold or the cloudiness, come over to our conference. I run the volunteers, by the way, so if you need a free entrance, you're just willing to donate some 3 hours of your time, I can get you guys in for free. Shameless plug, but it's fine. I was an editor for a book called Practical Internet of Things Security that published last year. And I'm currently writing a book called the IoT Pen Testing Cookbook for Packet Publishing. So that's everything from hardware hacking to firmware reversing to mobile reversing, web, as well as best practices on how to fix those problems in the space. So again, there's never, talks and research is never good when it's only just bad. You have to have the good and how to fix things as well. I also have a couple CVEs under my belt. Such a painful process. Let's get started. So embedded device and technology. I mean, again, kind of seems like the trend is IoT. Generally, embedded is IoT, except much smaller, compact devices. Back in the 90s, they've been around for a while, obviously, but now they're just network connected with different types of protocols. Whether it be wireless protocols, BLE, Wi-Fi, Zigbee, Z-Wave, LoRa. Loads of them actually out there. So I'm going to be talking about more, again, from the offense and defense perspective, but as well as, what the embedded is consisted of, like connected vehicles. We know about, the different inputs and outputs, infotainment systems. You got the CAN buses. You got, it has Wi-Fi as well, depending on, the vehicle, medical devices, wearables, implantables. You have smart cities. You guys are very familiar with this type of technology. And some of the threats that kind of happened last year, and some of the big things that are of main concern, or it's kind of affected the industry moving forward, and kind of almost immediately for some devices. But taking a step back and talking about things like medical, and last talk, the keynote talked about St. Jude. Crazy enough, a week and a half ago, emergency surgery my grandma had, and she had a pacemaker from St. Jude installed. So. More research on that to come. Hopefully nothing too crazy. So St. Jude was acquired by Abbott Laboratories, which actually got fined a huge amount. We'll get into that. But medical and IoT and embedded, they're all the same problems as in the keynote you saw, hashes being dropped in a command shell. But there's more as far as where this data is being stored, how it's being transmitted, and it's usually clear text communications, unfortunately. And there's, again, CVEs from last year to reflect those findings. And then consumer and commercial and ICS devices, again, same pattern. They have hard-coded passwords, firmware in the firmware. We're going to discuss, how that gets in there, as well as command injection vulnerabilities. You can execute operating system commands, and then Mirai. It's funny, I was at a conference last week, and only one person out of maybe 100 people knew what Mirai was. Very, very shocking. So who's familiar with Mirai? Before I say that. Okay, you guys are familiar, awesome. And as you may know, Mirai was huge, or is huge, and it continues to sprout out to a various number of different types of IoT botnets. And that's because Mirai's source code is free, it's open, everybody can view it and make changes. It's very, very simple on how it works as far as Mirai is concerned, and how you can also tweak it. But usually, if a device is rebooted or reset, all you got to do is click that button from the 400-pound hacker and just regain them. You regain them like another one. You just keep going, literally just automated scripts that run. And everybody does this. There's a few researchers I know who constantly run Mirai code. But these different strands of IoT botnets are Hijame, BrickerBot, and Perserai. These are just a few of them. They're called vigilante type of IoT botnets, where they either shut down the vulnerable services, Telnet, FTP, things like that. And you have others like BrickerBot, where it literally bricks a device, denial of service device, kills it completely. And then Perserai, you have those types of IoT botnets that take control over IP cameras and DVRs, a different subset of IP cameras and DVRs that are P2P types of devices. So we'll go to P2P type of devices. It basically creates a backdoor in your network, traverses your NAT via stud intern servers. So you don't have to port forward for the consumer space. You don't have to port forward, let's say, any configuration for, to view your camera feeds. So it's usually for voice over IP types of devices, even doorbells, for example. Any IoT device usually does that for remote access, because how often do you have to open up ports anymore? Now they just open them up internally from your network, and now you have a port open and traverses your LAN. So much for firewalls and routers as far as your perimeter is concerned. I'm not sure if you guys got the 400-pound hacker joke, but I'm not going to get into it if you don't know it. So essentially what we have is an Internet of Phones. I mean, thousands and thousands of devices, and again, it's very, very simple. Preaching to the choir here. But how they find, or attackers find, or researchers find these bugs and vulnerabilities and exploit them is through some sort of methodology, a firmware exploitation methodology. You obtain the firmware in a number of different ways, whether that be through OTA, whether that be through JTAG, UART, whether that be through the vendor's website or through a mobile app as well. You can see hard-coded URLs as well. And then once you have the firmware, you can basically statically analyze and extract the firmware contents. And from there, you can then mount the file system. So whatever the file system would be, there's a number of different kinds, and we'll go through them right now. Analyze the content, and then also do runtime analysis and dynamic analysis as well. So like burp and zap type of scans where you don't have to have the device in hand, but you can emulate via Kimu, for example. Who's heard of Kimu before? Okay, a few. Who has reverse engineered firmware before? Awesome, okay. How about web? Anybody web people? Okay, we got a mixed crowd. So as far as the firmware exploitation methodology, let's do a quick demo. I got 3 live demos, so crossing my fingers they all work. One of them I'm even VPNing to my home. So we'll see how this goes. All right, so you guys can see that. Is that clear enough for you guys? Big enough? Okay. So we have 2 pieces of firmware. I'll go through one right here. What I'm going to demonstrate is basically extracting a firmware image using something called binwalk. Anybody heard of binwalk before? Okay, binwalk-e general. Super, super simple. It's not always this simple, but generally in consumer space, it is this simple. So I extracted the firmware contents. Now I'm going to change directories into the firmware contents. And now let's see what we have here. We have other firmware images, they meant to partition it. Now let's go ahead, since I know where, I'm looking for the root file system of the embedded device. So this is actually an IP camera, one affected by Mirai, as a matter of fact. So let's binwalk again. Now let's change directories into that image, and let's look at using a CramFS file system, root file system. Now let's just check for hard-coded credentials. What do you know? Let me bring that up here. We do have some hard-coded credentials here. And this is something that the user can never change. It has to be directly from the vendor, the OEM, and we'll get through the supply chain. And even sometimes the OEM can't change this value. It's hard-coded by basically, they're called ODMs. Again, we'll get through those in a minute. So simple stuff, right? Not too hard. Binwalk's a free tool. Again, obtaining the firmware is it's half the battle. I have a little link here for you guys. If you're not familiar with any other type of firmware tools, there's definitely a lot more. Just Binwalk's the easiest and go-to. There's other ones that actually do the firmware emulation for you. I actually set up QEMU so you can do dynamic analysis, runtime analysis using something like GDB, do breakpoints, and that's how you find heap and stack overflows, for example. Oh, that was my live demo. So the supply chain and how these devices are created. Okay, you have a board, right? You start with the PCB, then you have a BSP, board support package. It's exactly that. The packages that support the board that you're deploying with the device. So you have peripherals, you have Bluetooth, whatever, Zigbee, Z-Wave, you have UART, HDMI. And usually these are, Broadcom, Marvell, for example, are pretty common. If you look in your Wi-Fi drivers, you usually see Broadcom, even Android devices. But they're definitely huge in the IoT space as well. From there, you have your ODM, original device manufacturers. And this is kind of where the problems stem out for IoT, and I don't think it'll ever get resolved unless you have some sort of model like Apple, where it's very closed. Because the margins are so thin in these devices, you have a cent for a Wi-Fi module, and you have 20 cents to $1 for a TPM, a secure element. So obviously, those don't match up. Depending on the regulation, of course, that might make sense, but it's not super, super common. But the ODM here basically provides either a binary of the root file system, or even let's say subset of, let's say, USB, for example, like NetUSB, certain NetUSB, ROM pager, things like that. They're basically outsourcing outsourcing and exposing an SDK to the OEM. Now, on top of the ODM, you have the cloud service provider, Amazon AWS, for example, Microsoft Azure. But what's funny now is you have the BSP board support package makers also teaming up with cloud service providers like Marvell is working with Amazon AWS that provides AWS SDKs as well as Marvell's SDK. So again, these are different code bases, different teams. And then same thing with Microsoft Azure. They're teaming up with Intel for their products and their IoT development kits. So that way they can have, again, remote access. That's the point of IoT. That's the point of this whole trend. So as far as the ODM space right here, Zhongmai, this is the company, the ODM, that created or was responsible for Mirai. Chinese ODM, and then basically the OEMs rebranded, and then there's also resellers who rebranded, and it kind of creates a whole chain where it becomes unrealistic to basically backport even security flaws. Again, because how are you going to go from, let's say, a Nest here to, and again, these ODMs as well are like 10 people from Taiwan or China as well. I've been on the calls with these teams, and if you ask what type of security controls are in place for firmware of the device itself, their answer is they have 128-bit encryption. They're good. A self-signed certificate, by the way. So they're small teams. They last between 5 to 10 years even. They branch out into other small companies. It's quite funny to see them evolve. We usually have bigger companies who partner with known ODMs, more established ODMs, but let's say, again, it's basically faster to market. So the OEMs choose the cheaper ODM to create a software stack, and the ODM just supplies their name and maybe a couple different features. But again, backporting from OEM for a security bug over to a bug that starts either from Broadcom or even from the ODM standpoint, not only are there a lot of dependency issues, but there is no, let's say, streamline for communication, and even as far as drivers are concerned, to make sure there's consistency and there's testing. But not only that, well, that's the biggest pain point. We'll get into more in just a bit. So as far as the common operating systems that these devices run on, again, I'm speaking low level as far as embedded only at this point. Same embedded Linux. Probably the most common. You have Android that runs off of that. You have legacy kernels. I've seen 2.6 even being deployed as Kickstarter projects for even IoT home security devices, which is funny enough. You have real-time operating systems, RTOS. Anybody heard of RTOS before? Okay, few. It's usually, for the most part, it's a commercial license, but you also have a free RTOS. So I gave you the example of Marvell working with AWS. Marvell actually creates the operating system and uses free RTOS, and then connects the AWS SDK together, so the OEMs basically just patch together their code bases and merge it. It sounds odd. But again, RTOS, there's mostly commercials, aside from the Marvell example. You have VxWorks, QNX for BlackBerry, MQX, you have Green Hills. And then you go to the Windows embedded side. Not a big Windows guy. But usually they're point of sale systems, POS. Not the POS you're probably thinking about, but it really does relate. But also medical devices. Medical devices are run on Windows XP, Windows CE, but they're still a Windows embedded version of those operating systems. And now this is relevant for, again, medical, I stated. Now, medical did get affected. Windows embedded medical devices did get affected by WannaCry. So you got to think about that as far as the attack surface and the different types of platforms. And I guess I don't know if I'd rather go with an old Linux kernel or go with a Windows embedded type of operating system. Well, I know what my answer is, but I mean, think about the attack surface here. Windows IoT Core. And again, I mentioned that with Intel. Intel's working with Azure, but it's called Windows IoT Core as the platform that they're working on, the operating system. So there's plenty to choose from, but the most common, especially in the consumer space, is embedded Linux. And we'll speak more towards embedded Linux as far as the presentation is concerned. So the basic contents of embedded Linux, you have a bootloader, whether it be U-boot, Red Boot, you have the kernel, whatever Linux kernel it may be, and it could be custom kernels as well. And then the root file system, there is, CramFS is one of them, SquashFS. There's loads of them out there, but those are pretty common. There's definitely more. But the root file system is where you have your configuration settings, configuration files, your service files, things of that nature. And again, you can always partition out and separate out as far as the firmware contents and the features concerned. So let's say you only want to have the services in one sort of binary image, and then only have custom services in another binary image. So similar to what we have here, they have U-boot in one directory here. They have the web, they have the root file system, they have user, and they also have a custom. So you can basically, and this is how like ODMs send their products or their images or SDK, again, as a binary over to an OEM. And OEMs, they're not going to reverse engineer an ODM's code base, and we'll get to that in a bit. So some best practices we'll touch upon today, and this kind of stems off the project that I lead, is buffer and stack overflow protection, injection preventions, firmware updates, and cryptographic signatures, securing extensive info and data, and how to store that as well, identity management, embedded hardening, and tool chain hardening as well, debugging code and interfaces, TLS, usage of data as far as privacy and where it goes, third-party code and components, and I think one of the most important aspects of creating secure embedded devices is starting with threat modeling even. I mean, basic threat modeling would, if any of these ODMs did basic threat modeling, a lot of these problems with, the easy to find Telnet, ClearText, FTP, simple flaws in design would be forwarded right there in the design stage, and even before deployment. And again, we'll speak to a few of these, or many of these, and not all of them. And I'll give some examples as well, even with threat modeling. I haven't seen a good threat model IoT, talk or slide or anything like that, so got something coming for you guys. And here I have the Git book of the project that I lead. And again, I like to keep it updated, so if any of you guys have feedback or want to contribute in any way. And cool thing is that we have people from PCI working on it, people from universities over in the States, and even over here in the EU as well. And also the FTC is actually looking at using this documentation to point negligent manufacturers when there are flaws in these areas. So it's a good step forward, and what it is basically provides low-level C, and C++ examples, a non-compliant example and a compliant example, and then why it's non-compliant, and then how, why this is compliant, what makes this safe. So it's not just, these basic design principles that everybody talks about, and where there's no examples of where a developer who's been writing C and C++ for 15, 20 years, never had any security training, and you give them, a PDF, and you give them these principles, they don't know what that is, they don't really care even, they have no incentive as well. But when you put it in their language, you put it in their world as far as their build systems, and C and C++, their languages, they don't have frameworks like the web does, where auto escapes, or outputting codes even, let's say JavaScript, for example. They don't have those types of frameworks. So again, this project is based on helping, providing practical solutions that developers can work on and prevent and mitigate these top easy vulnerabilities that can be prevented. Just walking through buffer and Stack Overflow protection. This is, again, preaching to the choir. This has been something that's been spoken about years and years and years. Nothing new. Prevent dangerous C functions. Who's heard of that before? Okay, yeah, so many of you guys have. Here's like a simple find command. If you have a source, you reverse engineer the application to find string copy and string length and discover how much of those appear within the code base, and you can find out what you want to target as far as an attacker is concerned, and even from a defense perspective, how you can check those bounds and validate those inputs, for example. And then use safe equivalents like gets and fgets. And there's definitely a lot more, and the guidance document, the Git book that I have, provides those solutions and some considerations as well, and also references where in the wild, in the industry, devices and manufacturers and embedded software has been compromised due to some of these problems here. Now, enable stack protection in build systems. Who's heard of Buildroot before? Awesome, you guys are embedded guys, there's only a few. Who's heard of Yocto? Awesome, sweet. That's surprising, usually it's the other way around. So these are embedded build systems. This is how firmware is made, developed, basically a menu configuration. So for example, enabling stack protection in Buildroot looks like this. Simple, literally a little star here. Again, Buildroot up here. But if they only knew how simple it was to input some sort of a stack canary, randomized integer into the stack, and if modified, it would fail. Something like CSRF protection, think about it like that if you don't know what stack canaries are. But again, pretty simple, right? I mean, it's almost no excuse, but you'd have to know which menu option it'd be to enable this, and again, it's not too difficult. Injection preventions, whitelist accepted commands, avoid using any type of dynamic data for system processing. Validate input, output, and encode characters, and you can use either Burp Suite, Zap, or something called commits. Anybody use commits for command injection? It's almost like a SQL map for command injection, so you can even find what's called blind command injection. So you can't see the response, but you can see, let's say, based off a ping, on a listener that there is command injection. And these are super common. Again, and I'll go through an example in just a second, but for that Perserai botnet, what they're exploiting is a command injection within an FTP function for an IP camera. That's used not only on the DVR, but on the cameras themselves. And even, not only cameras, but even smart door locks as well. They're using the same firmware, same exact firmware. All right, let's try this. This is the one I'm gonna VPN home. All right, so I created a script for it, and then we'll go through what the script is. see if it works. Yes, it works. Okay, we're getting a response. So command injecting that same example here. Right here, instead of doing the ping, I'm actually, we'll see if it responds. No. It's funny, I tried it 3 times when I was waiting in the back. Oh, there we go. Now we're in a shell. Here we are, root. And what do you know? Let's just even look here, because there's also a hard-coded password. What do you know? So what this is, again, command injection basically dropped it into a shell without any username or password. I didn't even use the credentials here. And the reason for that is, now what this uses is for FTP. Now this is going all the way to LA, so let's see how. It's obviously not going to be as fast. It basically inputs, blindly accepts these arguments here. This telnet, I just basically opened up telnet, port 25, dropped it into a shell without a username and password. Super, super simple. Let's look at the script really quick here. So all it is, again, for the password, just literally just bash here, open it up, starting telnet on port 25. All I have to do is, again, it's going to open up just to a shell command. And in order for the setting to save, you have to call this script here, this CGI. And it's funny, it also has the username and password in the URL. So there's that. So again, these IP cameras, in the keynote, they're Swiss cheese. But it's fun to get some reverse shells over command injection, like if you could get a limited or like let's say netcat or even Meterpreter. I have not tried Meterpreter yet. But again, very, very simple, very, very common. There's my live demo. And basically how this looks as far as code's concerned is having a dynamic value. Again, that's not escaped, not validated. Oh, something happened? So just looking at this piece of code here, we have the any command that is dynamic, that is being executed by system here. And you can see the command bus right here is what calls this any command. What you can do basically to execute this system command is basically add, write whatever parameter and then add user as an attacker. Again, simple, not validated, not escaped at all. As far as firmware, this is a sore topic for a lot of people, and even manufacturers from the consumer space, the regulated space, and even again, commercial ICS, and even consumer as well. But you always want to update over TLS, have it automatic or scheduled updates. With the caveat on medical devices, again, pacemaker, for example, you can't just update a pacemaker in the middle of usage. But forced updates, again, aside from medical devices, in certain scenarios. This happens in consumer space right now. I know for DVRs, this is happening since Mirai. Manufacturers who weren't affected by Mirai have taken steps to make sure they're not going to be affected in the future. So even if you buy a new DVR from a number of different DVR makers, that they'll force update before you even use the device, as well as the cameras. So they'll make you update the device before using it. And also even downgrading, having some sort of anti-rollback protection, not letting old vulnerable firmware be loaded. And again, this is actually dependent on the license that's being used on the device. So if it's GPL, it has to be kind of open. You have to release a source code. So let's say Linksys devices, for example, GPL, you can load your own firmware, but you have to know the drivers that are compatible with the board, which they do release, by the way. But again, that's dependent. Not everybody follows those licenses, unfortunately. And again, maybe it could be different reasons, proprietary reasons. It's arguable. But you definitely want to cryptographically sign your updates and validate and verify that the firmware did come from a trusted source, like a manufacturing OEM source and server. And even from the public key, the root chain as well, is what you want to validate. This is something we did at Balkan as well for updates, and that's one of the things we got slapped in the hand for by researchers was hard coding. I didn't know about this. I walked into it, hard coding a GPG key, private key, in the devices, so you can basically upload any type of firmware. So that was kind of a pain point there, but again, we'll discuss some more other painful things that happen. We also want to include some changelog details about security-related vulnerabilities. People are getting better about this, and again, even in the IoT industry. And when I got started 3-4 years ago with Belkin, again, like Gino was saying, there wasn't much out there, but now we have a bunch of researchers. It's a playground for all of us, really. But to include these security fixes and give credit where it's due, definitely that helps the community as a whole, and even incentivize researchers. That's kind of self-explanatory. Firmware versions are clearly displayed. But storing this data and how you're going to store it and not basically hard-coding values, tokens, passwords, PII data into firmware images. And again, this is also common, unfortunately. But when you do have something sensitive, store it in, let's say, a secure element if the device is, say, more regulated. Maybe it's an ICS device, definitely should have some sort of capability to do so. Consumer device, again, the argument between 1 cent and 20 cent in margins, it doesn't make as much sense for them. But still, it doesn't have to be saved on disk. And don't store it in unprotected locations. Unprotected locations like SD cards, for example, flash, or the EEPROM. EEPROM is basically 8-pin chip. You can basically take it off board and pull all the contents as well. You have a hard-coded value here. This is one by D-Link that basically bypasses authentication if you send this user agent header. Well, don't do that. But again, if you find the firmware, like I said, it's half the battle. If you find something like this, it's simple, right? I mean, you know what to send, you know what to try, you know what to test. So similarly to any, whether it's mobile, whether it's any thick app, any type of reversing, you always want to statically analyze first, and then validate and verify what you see statically, dynamically. So whether that be, when the device is running, in other terms. So who got slapped in the head again is D-Link. Not only D-Link, this is by FTC, but also ASUS got slapped in the hand. So this is something that's different. They get fined, and they're also mandated to perform pen tests for the next 20 years. This hasn't happened in the consumer space, especially in IoT consumer space, for not doing their own due diligence and advertising false sense of security and easy to set up, and also having insecure defaults and putting people at risk. I actually showed this backdoor account here, and it's probably the demo 3. And this backdoor account was one for Perserai, and I believe I have, did I crack it? I do have the cracked password though, and it's online available as well. And this just released actually in March, late March. And again, it's being exploited. I think 2 weeks ago, even there was a whole case study done on it by Trend Micro. If you want to have a look at Perserai and these exact camera vulnerabilities, and you saw how easy they are to exploit. And again, those are the camera vulnerabilities that use your network to open up a port that external third parties for the camera can view your camera feed even. And I say it that way because I just, the same camera has like 10 apps and 3 different cloud providers, and somehow, I don't know, they're different infrastructures. One day AWS, one's like a cloud provider, a hosted cloud provider, but they all have my credentials. So I don't know, it's really weird, decentralized and very scary at that. How they all kind of work together, OEM-wise or ODM, or they're cloud providers. So your camera feed is being seen by a lot of people. So if you do the research on a DVR or home security system, make sure to check whether there are external applications that can have access to your camera feeds and with authentication or unauthentication, because chances are there are multiple apps, multiple web applications that can access your camera, again, without opening ports at all, which is the most scariest part here. And this kind of leads into like identity management and separating of accounts between external and internal users. But again, at this point, what's the difference between external and internal when you're traversing networks and routers and firewalls? But I mean, some sort of due diligence for your session IDs and tokens and session storage. Again, all day you'll see an embedded device, even if it has a mobile app and no web application, they're sending your session ID over a GET request. And you saw just like the admin example, and even mature, let's say doorbell or door locks, even do the same. They think you're not going to proxy the traffic, or they're using SSL, so it's not possible to man in the middle. But as researchers, we have ways around that, and you can see that these session IDs and tokens that do not expire, even if you log out and change the password, are being sent over the URL. So again, we want to put some guidance, and again, there's specifics as far as how to do this right within our the guidance document, the Git book that I discussed earlier. And if you're going to use an EEPROM or a UART, I'm sorry, which is a serial interface, hardware interface, basically, that manufacturers use to validate configurations on devices. So it's sometimes required in order to see whether a device is configured correctly. So this is why this is on there. Even, I know we tried to cover it up and put some, other pieces of the board on top of it. But again, it's just defense in depth is the idea for embedded in IoT in general. But what we did for Balkan, for example, we put a 32-character password for UART. So have fun trying to attack that alphanumeric special characters. So trying to influence the industry to move towards that direction rather than password 123 or 123456 for UART passwords, because sometimes they will have passwords, and it's just as simple as that 123456. And it's funny, I mean, embedded framework hardening, this is basically Linux hardening, but for either BusyBox and services that are running on top of BusyBox, and again, just general Linux as well, but even cleanliness, like Langsec, for example, remove unused code and libraries. And sometimes developers and manufacturers already do this because the storage where this code base is being run from is very small, but if they have enough space, they really don't care. It's almost like the Android, accept all permissions for frameworks with Cordova, as an example. But again, you want to move dead code, libraries, services that aren't being used, as well as shell interpreters. But definitely take out these legacy vulnerable daemons, FTP, Telnet, and iterative threat models. Again, I'm going to keep harping on threat models because I think it's super important and crucial in order for us to get to a place where we need to be. And again, basic threat modeling. You just need to spend one day and going through an exercise on threat modeling. So here's an example of enabling just bash. And I have seen bash, dash, and ZSH enabled on one embedded device. And sometimes they think that they took it off during development, but it's also just being pushed in production. So simple, and this is build root again. So it's menu config. And you can also, I'll get to that in just a second, but for example, taking off FTP here and enabling something like SSH. And there's the same menu configuration for the kernel as well. So if a company is going to build their own kernel, it's called kconfig. It has the same drop-down menu as well, where you can modify your kernel. So debugging code and interfaces, and this is more speaking towards like the root passwords and hard-coded credentials that cannot be changed. And again, yes, admin is a problem, admin password is a problem. But again, it stems from the ODM and supply chain aspect of how these devices are made and created. And unfortunately, it's so common where we see, these debugging interfaces, encode and backdoors within devices, libraries, and SDKs. And again, what we try to work towards, and this is something again from what we did over at Balkan and Linksys, was have some liability put on the ODMs, forcing them to have someone on staff security-wise, and then provide security updates for a number of years, 6 years, whatever it may be, or until the device is deemed end of life. And that's depending on the manufacturer when they want to state the device's end of life. But again, right now there's no liability. The ODMs are gone, like I said, in 3-5 years. But if you put some sort of contractual agreement, you have, I guess, some weight to pull from that aspect. And nothing. And again, the IoT, space and consumer space, definitely, there's no regulation. You have like self-certification or using something like UL 2900, which is new. But again, it's more of a pay-to-play type of organization and test where it's very close. Like I don't know what test is being run. And neither does the manufacturer as well. But again, super common, and usually what they do is basically run a series of tests, and like unit tests, and just check marks. And they're like, oh, looks good to me. I've seen this literally, so like, and this is Stevie Wonder. Stevie Wonder's blind, so they're not even looking at it. So when you have like the Windows certification, Zigbee, Wi-Fi, OS X, they have little stickers on the boxes. All they are just unit tests, and that they're automation tests that the QA team runs. Literally, if you go into a QA lab, it's just like check, check, check. They don't even know what's running. And the same thing similarly to like UL 2900, for example. It's probably another different form of that. But it has to be in an automated fashion in order for these devices to be mass produced. But again, no one's really looking. And again, we have to keep up security automation-wise for making and deploying these devices. But yeah, they're not looking at security as far as that's concerned. And this is an important part, third-party code and components. Have a bill of materials, what libraries are being used, what software, inventoried out. I believe, I forgot the exact standard that's pushing this, but in China, they're requiring this for manufacturers to have a bill of materials. I think it's for the medical space, either medical or IoT, but definitely, I forgot which standard it is. They're requiring OEMs and manufacturers to have a bill of materials. But when you have a bill of materials, you know what software is running, you know what versions. Check against vulnerable databases, NVTs, and also use free tools. Again, these devices are heavily JavaScript as well. There are a number of different libraries. Whether it's front-end JavaScript, you can use Retire.js. You can use NSP for Node.js, Linus for operating system hardening and kernel hardening, and guidance on securing services as well. And then for dynamic testing, you can use free tools like OWASP Zap, and even have APIs and automation you can input into, let's say, your agile CI environment. And this lib scanner here for Yocto, this also has like an XML output where you can input, where you can use these tools inside your environment. And we'll give an example right now. It just basically scans your packages and your package numbers. But also you want to utilize package managers. Now, everyone's heard the term of reflashing or re-updating or a device. In order to update a piece of firmware, you have to flash the whole device. It's not necessarily true. You can use a package manager. And if you're familiar with any type of small embedded device, or a Raspberry Pi, or even like Wi-Fi Pineapple, they have package manager, IPKG. You can also utilize that, but as far as manufacturers are concerned, they have to do some testing, because a lot of dependencies in embedded devices that you wouldn't even think about, even like SQLite will extend out to another third-party service you wouldn't have any clue. But it's definitely possible. It just takes some testing. So here's lib scanner. Basically, it's for Yocto. Point it to the install packages, and it queries for CVEs. And it gives you the output and the severity, and if it failed as well, when it was published. So test cases. We need to have some sort of automation for this space to improve. And again, threat modeling. It's important. A basic methodology to threat model IoT devices, and generally any sort of application, but you have to identify the assets, you have to create a device architecture overview, decompose the device, identify the threats, document the threats, and rate the threats. So Stride, Dread, I'm not going to go through those in detail, but just so you have an idea as far as the workflow to threat model these devices. And here's an example of the firmware of just taking inventory of the firmware and the libraries that are being used. It might be a little small, but Blunt HTTPD, DNS, OpenSSH, libUPnP, some DVR config files, logs, operating system config files. Even again, this is embedded Linux with the bootloader. Just taking a basic overview of the assets, and then here's an overview of device functionality, like how the device functions when you save, let's say, a video. Again, this is using a DVR is what I created. You have raw data feed using RTSP, DVRs on the LAN using your trust boundaries, internet boundaries, the cloud, ICE and stun server, Android application, but also how it's being used, credits and camera recording stored in mobile devices. So how the functionality of the DVR or the device or the ecosystem in which it's deployed in. So again, it's context specific. So this is for, let's say, small businesses. This could be for consumer. But for more like medical, for example, would have a different layout as far as the impact and the safety and the privacy concerns as well, and the analysis and those aspects of where the device is being deployed. But here's another example of just renaming and using RF, like how the device communicates radio frequency-wise, if it's Wi-Fi, if the mobile application is using 3G, 4G, if the application is using HTTP, TCP/IP, things like that. So again, you want to rinse and repeat. You want to continue strep models updating. I did, for example, updated this strep model to the RF side and move things around accordingly. So it's very important to do continuous strep models, even from an attacker perspective, before you get started. Continuous testing, whether that be statically, dynamically, interactively, or pen testing as well. Update as much as possible from the consumer standpoint. And if you can, again, update automatically. A lot of devices do have that functionality. And if you're reporting bugs to any of these manufacturers, reference a disclosure policy like ISO 29147. This is something that's the bug bounty programs use as well. Platforms like HackerOne. Actually, I think Katie from HackerOne helped create this disclosure policy here. But also influence the involvement of the community and point the manufacturers, the vulnerable manufacturers, and basically enlighten them to what other manufacturers are doing and how they're getting involved. That's usually what I do. It's like the car research. I referenced how like Ford and other car manufacturers are, and Fiat are using, Chrysler are using bug bounties while Subaru did it, for example. And they were enlightened as far as, okay, well now we can have some sort of starting point and using something like Iron Cavalry's five-star program as a baseline. So again, just enlightening them, involvement in the community is the idea. And some closing thoughts here. It's still 0 days if they didn't update it, technically. Let's keep breaking things. I know for us over in the States, at FTC, basically we are DMC exempt for security research now if you rightfully own the device and perform the research under a controlled environment. And if the research happens after October 28th, 2016, so it's way past that. So just think about how that wasn't possible with jailbreaking devices and even circumventing like Xbox, for example. But now we can. Let's keep doing it, and I'll help you. If you want to hack, can I cuss here? Want to hack some shit? Let's hack some shit. Thank you guys. My name is Aaron. My email is up there.
Thank you, Aaron. That was great. I think we have time for 1 or 2 questions. If there's any hands in the crowd, right here.
When it comes to stack protection, is there any reason why you would have that box not checked?
That's exactly what
Does it just default on?
No, they don't. That's the thing. We have to have more secure defaults, but no, it's not a default in the build systems, unfortunately. In Yocto, it's not a build configuration like build root. As far as menu configuration like build root, it's more you have to put manually input the configurations in there and secure compiler flags, GCC compiler flags.
All right, over here. Okay, let's see.
All these IoT devices, how do they usually connect to the internet? Are they connected outside the router, or is it like are they opening up the router for so you can connect into them?
Yeah, that's the exact. Basically like a reverse tunnel. Think about it that way. Like a hybrid cloud, they're using a device inside your network to call out to their cloud environment, to open up that port, open up a pinhole, and think about voice over IP systems. This is how they work with UDP. And they are UDP tunnels, like that P2P bot, the Personify, is using a UDP tunnel. And this is more common in small business and consumer routers, that functionality where you can open up a pinhole without port forwarding from inside the network. It uses something called UPnP IGD, internal gateway device, something is what it's called. So very scary, but yeah, it calls from in your network, opens up a port. Reverse tunnel is what I see it as.
Thanks, Aaron, for a good talk. The ODM issue is liability and supply chain. So do you see that these ODMs are now going into bug bounty situations and disclosure policies as well?
No. ODM side, not at all. Definitely the OEM side. There are manufacturers that are going through bug bounties and being more open to that, but ODM side, they're small teams. They have no incentive. They don't have any contractual agreements either. But I have not seen one ODM participate in the community at all, unfortunately.
All right, unfortunately that's all the time we have for questions right now. So please put your hands together once more for Aaron. That was a great talk. And we'll have our next speaker on stage in about 10 minutes. So if you do want to get some coffee, please do, and be back here in 10 minutes.
Jag löste Ashores lilla mini-fälla. Jag ska ställa dit till prata med en telefon. Då går han så här. Förutom att det sticker upp så är det faktiskt ut. Really? You guys didn't know? Lunch. Så jag har ju en... Jag har en han satt ut hela natten. Han sa att han hade så mycket pengar. Jag har inte här i sig och han hade bollen. Så den borde inte ha exakt. Tjena! Hallå, hallå! Jaha, det står för tekniken i år igen. Så är det. Hur är läget då? Har ni slitat sista dagarna här? Ja, men hur lång tid? Ja, det var lätt igen. Jag har inte varit inblandad i arrangemanget så att säga. Ni funderar så mycket. Så att det går och letade fram alla grejer och de låg och testade igenom allting och konstaterade så här efter ett tag så här. Det är helt magiskt. Det har alltid funkat tidigare. Eller, det har funkat tidigare. Ja, det är. Varför funkar ingenting? Varför går ingenting in? Varför går det inte att streama och så? Om den Thunderbolt-kontakten sitter i den porten så funkar det inte. Nej. Men det är två likadana portar. Det är bara att den ena är nummer 1. Det måste vara att den någonting någonstans kommer ihåg att ja, men den där näten ska sitta där eller. Men det var ändå så här att jag satt så här säkert en kvart eller någonting innan jag insåg det att om jag bara flyttar den därifrån till dit så löser sig allt. Men det ser ut som en seriös rigg det här. Ja, det är så seriöst. Broadcasting. Streamar ni också? Ja, jag vi streamar för de mickarna där har oss lite grann. Aha. Så det sitter säkert någon ute på internet och undrar vad svenska är för något.
Nu har jag inte en bra gammal politik.
Ja, men det är jättebra arrangemang som vanligt. Eller går igen.
Ja, men det är det jag tänkte. Sen löp något. Någon som gör massa konstfortällar. Är det du som har gjort den? Jag har faktiskt aldrig hört att det inte var så. Jag tror inte det är många som har gjort det i sån där. Det är jag. Ja.
All right, guys, it's about time for our next speaker, so please find your seats.
Bara för att ni att folk kan 20 så vad ni säger. Ni säger att folk 20. Jaha.
Ja, här.
Var det bättre lika?
Det är nog jag som är ganska mycket. Jag tycker allt samtidigt. Jag har klaster som bara kör skitplast på jag har ju 2 poäng in. Ja, men det är så. Det var så hektiskt. Mike Nolan.
getting hungry yet? One talk left until lunch, which is going to be right through here, by the way. But we'll update you after this talk. All right, looks like almost everyone is in their seat, so we're going to begin with our next speaker. Please give a warm welcome to
welcome everyone. My name is Csaba Ficzl, and I will talk about how to convince the malware to avoid us. So who am I? Actually, back to my name, if you work with people with other languages, I learned yesterday that Csaba in Swedish means hi. And when I work with Spanish people or people who talk Spanish, they kept calling me cassava, and it was really consistent. And at one point, I looked it up, and apparently it's a melon in Spanish, or so whatever. So I'm a blue teamer. I'm working for the past 5 years as part of an incident response team. I do incident response, forensics, malware analysis, basically everything you can imagine as part of an IR team. I also love to do security research. I have a blog, but for the past 2 years I don't have too much time to post anything, but sometimes I do. I'm a certification monkey. I purchased this term from a trainer called Jeremy Chiora, who does Cisco trainings, and it basically means I love to do certifications for some weird reason. Not that it means anything. I have a wife and an almost 4-year-old son, and I love to do hiking. So besides computers, I try to have a normal life and go outside the house. And actually this picture made in the Alps last year. So what is this talk about, really? Basically this sign. In the real world, if we try to scare away people or keep people away from a certain place, we put signs like, you are not authorized to come in here, or if you come in you will fall and die, or it's a biohazard, or there is some nuclear radiation. So basically just scare away people that that environment is harmful for them and potentially they can die, and as people don't like to die, they will avoid that place. I never been at this place, but probably as I love to do hiking, I probably wouldn't care of this sign, but yeah, so my agenda, I will have 3 main parts. First to overview what malware authors are afraid of and what they do to detect it. Then I will review a few real-world samples, and the last part I will show my proof of concept tools. I will have plenty of demos or recorded, so sorry for that. I didn't sacrifice any animals for the demo gods, so I'm going with video. So let's see what malware authors are afraid of. Security researchers. So these days, if you are a malware analyst, basically with reverse engineering you can reveal what the malware does. So you can reveal its operation, then you can write signatures to detect it, either static or behavioral. Basically you can uncover everything, and obviously malware writers doesn't like this, so they try to make the malware researchers' life hard. So they do many tricks to make it hard to reverse engineer their malware. And as part of it, they know that as it's a long process, you usually do malware research on a virtual machine because that's the simplest. So they will go, okay, I will detect if I'm running on a virtual machine, I will do something else. Or sandboxes. So sandboxes are really just automated malware researchers. And if the malware can see that, okay, if I'm running in a sandbox, I will do something else and not do my real job, so the sandbox doesn't detect me. Or it will avoid hardened machines, so if the machine is running an AP or something, it will go away. So simply saying, malware doesn't hates being analyzed. And sometimes it also tries to avoid certain targets, like you have a Russian keyboard, okay, I will leave you alone. So how they do it? This is a huge topic, probably we could spend a week just talking about this, so this is just a very high-level overview. Debuggers. So that's one of the favorite. Malware hates being debugged, so people usually doesn't love to be watched by the boss when they work. So with malware, so if it's being debugged, how it can detect it? There are plenty of methods. The most classic one is just simply running the isDebugger present Windows API call, and if you are being debugged, it will say yes. You can, instead of calling the API call, you can just check various flags, like the process environment log isDebug flags. Actually, the isDebugger present API call will check these flags. You can check other flags. You can call the output debug string, which is if you are running inside the debugger, it will run. But if you are not running inside the debugger, then it will throw an error because it cannot produce an output to a debugger. So if it doesn't produce an error, it means that you are being debugged. Or you could do timing checks. Like normally if your codes run outside of debugger, if you check your code at 2 points of time, probably a few milliseconds will pass, but that's all. If you are being debugged, then it will be seconds or maybe minutes being passed, and you can easily detect them. You can either do it with the API calls or use the this read timestamp counter. This can read out the timestamp counter from the CPU and base the decision based on that. You can try to self-debug yourself. So you can say, okay, I will start debugging myself, but if there is a debugger already attached to you, you cannot attach another one. You can search for int3 instruction in your memory. int3 is it's an SMD instruction that the debuggers will place in the code to mark breakpoints. So malware can scan the memory for these, and if it's detected, then it knows that it's running in the debugger. Or just actual window name, like is there an only debug window running? And there are other methods. Virtual machines. You can look for registry items, file system artifacts, process names. Like if you install VMware tools in a virtual machine, it will leave traces in the registry, file system, processes, everywhere. You can check the MAC address of the virtual machine. VMware has a special I/O port that you can detect. There is another technique called the red pill. It's basically an instruction to read the address. There are many variations of this, but it will read the address of the global descriptor table register or the local descriptor table, so whatever these memory registers. And it will be different if you are running inside the VM because you have one global descriptor table per CPU, and if you have a virtual machine, then you have another CPU on the same physical hardware, so it will have some different value. These days, it might not so reliable since we have many cores in a computer, but it might still work. And if I go back, so like if you analyze samples in sandbox like Cuckoo or hybrid analysis on the web, they will have like signatures telling you that this malware is trying to detect if it's running in a VM. And there are many of those, so it's not like a unique item. Sandboxes, this is a huge topic. I really recommend everyone to watch Zoltán Balázs talk about the sandbox detection for the masses. He made a study about how these sandboxes look, and it's very interesting because if you are a sandbox, let's say malware can check the screen resolution, and many times the sandbox will have like 800 times 600 pixel resolution. Come on, these days, which computer has an 800 times 600? Probably, if it has, you can just leave it alone because it's solid. But so generally, sandboxes will have a much smaller resolution. So if you are setting yourself a Cuckoo, make it like look like a real computer, like make it full HD or something. The number of installed software. So if you use your computer, you will have probably like 50 different software installed on it. If you have a sandbox, you will probably install like Office, Acrobat, Java, Flash, Chrome, Firefox, and probably that's it. So if you are enumerating the installed software, it can give you a sense if you are running in a sandbox or not. Number of cores. Because having multiple VMs is resource intensive, so people will limit the number of cores in the VM. Now, these days, I think for the past 10 years, you cannot really buy a computer without at least 2 cores. So if you have a 1-core computer detected, then it will mean probably it's a sandbox. Memory, I think these days it's at least 4 gigabytes. Sandboxes will run like on half gig, maybe 2 gig, but typically not that more. Desktop. Anyone ever set up a Cuckoo VM here? So the below picture is like typically how you leave it. I did set up many VMs for Cuckoo, and when you install the base software with like XP, this is how your desktop will look like. And this is how most people just leave it. Now, a real desktop will have like plenty of icons in the taskbar, maybe plenty of files on the desktop. Users will have running application, maybe games like the screenshot above, and it will just look different. Antivirus, again, malware might be afraid of certain products. So it can just check if an antivirus is registered or not. It can check the registry file system, whatever, the same story. So let's see a couple of real-world malware samples. Do you remember WannaCry? It was pretty recent, and it had a technique inside to detect sandbox. So it looked up a random but hard-coded domain, and if it could resolve and access it, it said, okay, I'm running in a sandbox, so I will exit. This is a good detection because sandboxes will resolve every domain, most likely, but they actually screw it up because British guy, the guy behind the malware tech blog, registered the domain, and basically, essentially, he hid the first version of the malware, like any new run. This is another example. it's a word dropper, and it's also set for sandbox detection. And actually, I can quickly show this. So this was a word dropper with a macro, and you can just open the document. So you can use tools to like extract the macro, or you can just not start the macro and then review it. And although the macro is really obfuscated, is it seen? Yeah, probably the resolution here is not the best, but the point is that this dropper will check for the number of recent files opened with Microsoft Word, and if it's below 3, it will say, okay, I'm running in a sandbox, and what it will do is basically error out after it. Because in a sandbox you probably don't have any recent files, or maybe one, but in like a real-life computer, probably you have like 20 or 8, not sure if there is any limit. So this one is another example. This is a generic Trojan. It will check for no, it's in. Let's try to. Okay, plugin and works. So this is another example. This is it's a generic Trojan, and if you run it, it will check for a whole lot of stuff, like a lot of analysis tools, like Windows Sniffer, VirtualBox guest editions, Sandboxy, another sandbox, .NET Profiler, and all sort of stuff. Cygwin, and yeah, Wireshark, it's also there. I will not go through the video due to the resolution. But again, these are real-world samples that are checking stuff. This is another one. It's a Tesla crypt sample. Actually, you can take the hash and analyze it yourself. This is why I put it in the title. And it will go for antivirus detection. And it will actually detect the existence of ESET. So I'm not sure if we have anyone here from ESET, but basically your existence already preventing the malware from running. And I actually want to show this. So let's switch. So if we run Tesla crypt, so the ESET registry entry is not there, and if we just start the malware to run, it takes some time initially, so you can see here's the malware in the process tree. It takes a few seconds initially to actually start operating, so you can see it starts to migrate itself, and essentially it started another process here. And the Tesla crypt main sample had like, well, you need to believe me, it's 4,200 events done. and actually it checked for the existence of the ESET product, and it didn't find it. So what's the difference if I place the ESET string key in the registry in the right place? The malware will behave differently. So let me again little bit fast forward this one. So it had like 600 events when it exited. The process is not there anymore. It's not running. It didn't create any new process like in the previous case. And basically that's it. And if you check, when it tried to look up the ESET config, it was a success. So it found ESET on the computer. Well, it wasn't actually installed, but we kind of show that it's there. And so the malware escaped. So, and actually this is the point where I'm going with. You can scare away malware. But today's research, so what's in the focus really about this topic when malware tries to find VM artifacts, debuggers? It's actually mainly about hiding all these tools, because people try to do malware research and they want to hide their debugger, or they want to hide their VM. And like Poly Debugger has like plugins that has like 20, 30 tricks that can hide debugger and many things from a malware. Or like ZeroFox is a plugin for Cuckoo Sandbox, which will hide that it's a virtual machine. So the main focus really today is the malware researcher job. There is also another tool for the paranoid fish, the PA fish, which will verify the environment for you. So it will check plenty of stuff in the environment and tell if it detected that it's a sandbox or not. But what about vaccination? So this is the term people start to use for the other side when we want to scare away malware. When we try to emulate an unhealthy environment for it. It's not that much research, but actually it would be effective, as we saw with WannaCry or with TeslaCrypt or with other malware. So there is some research on this area, but not that much. So like these three items that I listed here, the things I found on this topic. So there was a white paper initially back in 2008. Then like 5-year quiet period, or at least I didn't find anything. Then Rapid7 had a blog post about vaccination in 2013. Then I didn't list it myself. I started to research this in 2015, and I blogged about it. And then just like 2 months ago, I found out that there was another talk in B-Sides Tel Aviv from Gal Witensky about this topic. Actually, he works for Minerva Labs that I will talk about later. And these days, we have a few tools that target specific malware to scare away, but there are no generic tools to do it. So this is my contribution to this topic. I started to create some proof of concept tools to this to show malware some unhealthy environment, and I started to experiment how we can do this. I'm not a developer. When I learned in the university, I learned coding, and at one point I actually wanted to be a programmer, but by the end of the university I decided not. So as usually don't write code, this is my development method. And I think many of us do this. Copy and paste from Stack Overflow or from the internet. So I did change codes, but I utilize other sources to do. So my first tool is the fake VM. That's a kernel driver that uses SSDT hooking to hook a couple of functions and to produce different results. So as it's using SSDT hooking, it's up to Windows 7 32-bit. Actually, when I wrote this tool, my original intention was to learn how to do SSDT hooking in a C language. And I use this example to do things. It can emulate VirtualBox and VMware PIs and registry entries. It's very easy to extend to anything else, so like you can add like the ESET or other antivirus registry keys to the tool. It's just like another if statement or whatever. And you can also control this tool externally and switch on, switch off certain items. So, where is my mouse? So just to show you, before I load fake VM, I run the PA-Fish tool, what I mentioned before, what it can detect from the environment. Now, I'm using virtual machine, especially that I have a Mac and this is Windows. So the PA-Fish will detect some items. I didn't hide like the MAC address and everything, but so there is a huge section for VirtualBox, which is here, so it didn't detect anything about VirtualBox. For VMware, it detected one file, not the registry entry, and the serial number and MAC address. So PA-Fish does see that it's a VM, but not through the items that I want to falsify or lie about. Okay, so let's see the two. So fake VM, this is a kernel driver. So the way you load it, you need to create a service. You can use the built-in commands, the sc create, and you can create a kernel driver service. Or you have the OSR loader tool that can load the file for you. Essentially, it will do the same, but then you don't need another tool this way. So you just register your sys file or driver and you start it. And it's running. And let's start PA-Fish again. So what it says this time. Actually, let me do it this way, sorry. So you can see that it can see VirtualBox through many registry entries. It will detect that there are VirtualBox files on the system, although there aren't any, actually. And it can also detect VMware tools in the registry. Now, I didn't install VMware tools on this computer, and it also detected other files. Now, I wrote a small controller for this tool to be able to switch on, switch off certain items, because let's say you have a malware and if they start to realize that okay, you can like falsify VMware or VirtualBox, then okay, if you have both, then that's probably not true. So someone is trying to like lie to us, and you can control if you only want to falsify only VMware or just VirtualBox. So if I switch off VirtualBox, as you can see, it's not detected anymore, but VMware is still detected. So this controlling is done through IOCPR codes, talking to the kernel driver. This can be done from user mode, so that's not a hard thing to do. Now I switched, I actually unhooked all the functions, so it's basically back to like a normal state. And now we can see that it doesn't detect either VirtualBox or VMware through the other methods, and then I can just switch back everything, like hook again all the functions, and I can just switch off VMware and then switch on like VirtualBox as I want. Even this controlling part can be easily extended, and it's like if-as statement and having a variable to track the status. So as you can see, VMware is not detected through registry now, but VirtualBox is detected. So the other tool is the fake debugger windows. So many times malware will check for the presence of debuggers or security tools, as we saw before. So this is a simple Windows application that will create a window for you, naming it OliDebug and WinDebug, and hide it, so you don't have like a disturbing window. Now I actually looked up a sample Windows application on Microsoft website. I copy-pasted it, I changed the window title, and that's it. And there is an option to show the window, and I took it out, so it remains hidden. And essentially that's very simple. And I wrote another tool to actually find these windows, so you can enumerate windows and you can see that Oli window is not found and WinDebug window is not found. I can start the real WinDebug. I run again the application and it will say, okay, WinDebug window is found. I close it, run it again, and again, none of the windows is found. Now I can run my homemade application, and basically it will create an Oli debugger and the WinDebug window. I run again the same application, it will tell, okay, I found Oli debug and WinDebug. Again, this is a very simple and easy way to lie about things. You can see that the process is running, it's consuming like half meg of memory, so it's really nothing. And you can actually scare away malware with this. And the thing I wasn't sure if I have a name in a window and I want them to use WinDebug with the same name, if it creates any conflicts, but not. It wasn't obvious to me. And then if I just end the process and run again, these windows are not found. The last tool, I called it the mutex grabber. So mutexes or mutants are other items which used by malware to check in the system, because the malware will say, okay, if I infected this computer once, I don't want to infect it again. Like mutants that the malware was trying to check. So my tool, it's written in Python, and it will periodically fetch malware.com for any new analysis and add those new mutants to the system. Now you can do some whitelisting because there are legit mutants that you don't want to create because they might conflict with other application, and you can also save and load mutants to the tool. So let's see how it works. First, let me just show you WannaCry. Yeah, the resolution is not the best. I'm not sure if it will be seen, but so when WannaCry was started to spread, I run this tool, and it took like a couple of seconds to actually find that mutant on malware.com because people were actively submitting samples to it. So this is the tool listing all the mutants it found and created. And if you look, then so yeah, it's not seen very well, but these are the two mutants that WannaCry used on the system. So again, as people submit this stuff, you can it's like a signature update for you. So what the tool can do, essentially, again, it's written in Python. Probably coding the GUI part to it was the hardest part. So it will fetch malware.com, it will start to load and create mutants. You can also monitor that in a process explorer. On the right, that all these mutants are actually created, and you can delete these mutants, so there is an active column that you can check or uncheck if you want to create it or not. By default, it will create it. You can whitelist a mutant because maybe it's a legit one, and if you whitelisted it, you cannot enable it again, unless you unwhitelist it. And you can load the whitelist, you can load mutants you saved, you can save your whitelist, your simply the mutant list, you can do whatever you want. And just to show that it can be effective against WannaCry. So what happens if you just run WannaCry? I will just forward it, and basically you can see that WannaCry started to encrypt all the files, and you have a couple of thousands of events or tens of thousands of events with accessing and writing to all of the files. So you can see that it's definitely running. But what happens if I start this tool and then start WannaCry, and there is a slight cheating here, what I will mention after. So I just loaded the WannaCry mutants from a file to the tool. So it created them on Windows, and then I will just start the WannaCry executable. And it stopped at about 1,700 events. And if I scroll down, it's exited. So the process terminated, and that's all. Compared to the previous event, when it started to encrypt everything. Now, it's effective, as we can see, but the cheating here was that WannaCry spread through some SMB exploit, and when it exploited SMB remotely, it was running in session 0, while your user session is session 1. And if you create the mutex in session 1, that's not seen in session 0. So essentially just creating the mutant in session 1 wouldn't save you from WannaCry specifically, but in this case, as I started WannaCry in the same user session, it prevented it. Many malware, I would say most malware, will not spread through remote kernel exploits, so essentially it will run in the same user session where you are, so this can be still effective. And yeah, so again, there is some good results here that you can actually scare away malware with such tools, but again, it's not that much research. And there are challenges, I think, in this area. So first is software compatibility. So let's say I want to lie about debuggers. I want to tell every application that, yes, you are being debugged. Does it cause any issues with legit real-world application? Do normal software care about virtual machine? Probably not virtual machine, but debuggers. Depends on the method you use. You can consume lots of system resources. So like creating mutants, if it's a couple of hundred, then it's good. But if you start to create like tens of thousands mutants on a system, you can take up resources. One way to do it is like with hooking, like the first tool, where I didn't create any registry or files on the system. I just hooked functions, and when it was searching for VMware, I just returned the value that yes, found. Or you can do user level hooking to lie about mutants. Again, what about low level vaccination, like the red pill items, when malware will check the global descriptor table or other things. The other thing is that you need to do it in a clever way. So you cannot just tell the malware there is everything on this system, because if there is everything, that will be suspicious. Again, if you say that I have VMware and VirtualBox in this machine, then that's probably not true. So that's not realistic. So you will have either VMware or VirtualBox. So you need to pick up one of them. Or malware will check for antivirus software. You cannot tell that I have 10 antivirus software running on this computer, because, again, that's not true, and probably that wouldn't work. So you need to pick it up in a good way and just say, okay, I have this antivirus product. And it can be dynamic, so maybe the malware will try to check for 10 and you can lie about the first one. But it's a challenge. Now, are there any production grade solution for this? Because as I mentioned, this is not an area that's so widely researched. And this is not an advertisement here, it just, I try to find tools which actually try to use this. And my first found was the Hitman Pro Alert tool, which has a vaccination feature, and it can do some vaccination. I don't know how they do it. Since it says active vaccination and not passive, I suppose they hook something or do something like that. And actually this tool has many other interesting ideas for protecting the computer. But actually this was the first tool I found about 2 years ago that they did some vaccination. And I checked it with PA Fish, the paranoid fish. What is seen actually, so what this tool will do. So first, if it's disabled, and if I just run PA Fish on the computer, again, this will be a virtual machine, so it will do find items, but not everything. So nothing about VirtualBox, and 4 items about VMware. Now, if we go and enable vaccination with Hitman Pro. Let's see what changes. Ignore the first part. So, VirtualBox, there is one item detected, and there are one more item detected for VMware. So it's instead of 4, there are 5. So it actually does say that you have VirtualBox and VMware on this computer. So if this area would become more commonly researched, and malware would say that, okay, if you have both, then okay, I will not believe you. This again might be a problem, but it's still a good. We are not there yet where malware will think it's suspicious, so I think it's a good step ahead. And the other tool I found is Minerva Labs. I don't really know too much about them, but they have a software dedicated for this one. I never use it, I don't know what it's capable, but it's promising. So they actually dedicated this for vaccination. As I know, they worked for a couple of years on this, and they have some good blog and research about this topic, and you can see that you can actually fight malware with vaccinating a computer. Conclusion, I do think it's an interesting area, which for some reason not being picked up by the security community. It is effective against malware. It's not effective against every malware, but if you can stop a certain percentage, it's already good. We cannot shoot for everything. I think it should be more commonly researched, and I think it can have not just 2 long-term effects, it can be more, but well, if this method would become really popular and people and other like security products will start to deploy these kind of techniques, malware might just say, okay, I will not stop caring about virtual machines, and that would be good because then it would ease the malware researcher jobs because they wouldn't have to deal with lying or hiding VMs debuggers. Or everything stays, and which is good then because we can protect against malware. Or we can end up somewhere in between, or as it's a cat and mouse game, both sides will evolve and both sides will progress, and if you do vaccination, then malware researcher will, okay, I will check a combination of items and make a conclusion based on that, and then we need to be more clever on the vaccinations. So, yeah, we will see, but we are not there yet. So that was all from me. That's my Twitter handle, and all these tools I show, it's on GitHub. That's the link. So thank you.
Thanks for a great talk. Do we have any questions in the crowd? Oh, lots of questions. Let's start over here.
A good talk. I just want to ask a simple, short question. So would you say the ultimate end game to fight the detection of virtual boxes is moving one step ahead by setting every flag to true with having multiple recent files and both VMware and VirtualBox and so on, to preemptively counter the cat and mouse game?
So I didn't get it. So
you said to prevent malware from detecting or tricking malware, you would say that you had a VirtualBox when you didn't.
Yes.
So one step ahead, would that be saying that you have everything in a VirtualBox to take one step ahead of the malware?
Yes. So there are plenty of stuff we can lie about. I was thinking about how we can maybe even lie about sandboxes, lie about maybe resolution or like recent files and this stuff. I'm not sure how that could be done. That's maybe another area that where the compatibility issues would come up, because other software might like query like the resolution of the computer and adjust the window or their own resolution based on that. So that might conflict. So I don't know the answer, but maybe other more clever people can find this out. But yeah.
All right, let's see right here.
Hi, I have a question from someone watching the live stream who wonders if it isn't possible that a follow-up reaction from the malware or the attacker could be to try to break the system instead of just quitting itself.
So yeah, so I think if we start to do this, malware will try again to go ahead, and then we will go ahead. And this will be like an endless game, just like everything else. But I don't know where it would end, if it ever. But yeah, so if we would start using such tool in a popular, like broad way, malware will definitely evolve and might come with other new tricks to find this.
Thank you.
All right, let's keep moving on.
Hi. So speaking of compatibility issues, one of the, I think, most interesting parts would be downloading a lot of malware and trying to find the most optimal combination of which keys are common malware looking for to find a easy way to create registry issues examples just to stop malware. Do you know if anybody has done any research on that or start playing around with that?
Yes, that's right. So that would be a good approach. I really don't know if anyone researched it. I think the Minerva Labs guys are the one who extensively researched this topic because they came up with a dedicated tool for this. But again, since they have like an enterprise-grade product, they will not tell anything how they work or what they do. So I don't know. But as like open source community or other researchers, I don't find. Again, those 4 items I showed, those are the public research I found on this topic.
All right, so we have one more question here. I think that's going to have to be the last one, unfortunately.
Yeah, so my question is more towards the use of this, and I was thinking about sandboxes. One of the purposes is to use heuristics to identify suspicious behavior of samples. So why not just look at samples that check for, am I running in a virtual environment? Are there AVs installed and so on, and just quarantine them and be done with it? Now that wouldn't help you analyzing the malware, but it would at least stop them at the border.
Yes, I agree. So that would be a step where like sandboxes would evolve and put this logic into the system. But so I think, as you saw, many of the sandboxes, like I know like Cuckoo for sure, and there is the hybrid analysis. I think that's the payload security. It's behind that site. I'm not 100% sure. They also have like signatures saying that this malware tried to detect VMware, and that's suspicious. So they have a scoring for that, and I think if something is checking for like a VMware or like an antivirus, that will raise the score.
All right, that's all the time we have for questions right now, but you will be available to answer more, I'm sure, during lunch and dinner. So please join me once more in thanking Csaba Witzel for this great talk. All right, so is anyone getting hungry yet? Yeah? Well, good news. Lunch is upon us. Let's see what time it is. All right, so we have 15 minutes. We can go check out the sponsor area. I know there's a lot of challenges still to be faced and there are prizes to win, so go and check that out for 15 minutes. Then at 12:30, we'll open the doors and through there is lunch. It's going to be served. It's going to be about an hour. And yeah, that's basically it. Cool.
Vad sa du? Ja, det var Mattias bad mig fråga. Han sitter och tittar på livestream.